This is Six African Trade Talks. Six African Trade Talks is a media partner of Intra-Africa Trade Fair, an initiative of Afreximbank in collaboration with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat and the African Union. Welcome to Six African Trade Talks. In this episode, I'll be talking about automotive industrialization and intra-Africa trade with the CEO of Automotive Industry Development Center, Andile Africa, based in South Africa. Andile, welcome to Six African Trade Talks.
Thank you very much, Jed.
Pleasure having you on the show. What kind of role or influence does South African automotive sector currently have on the global automotive sector broadly and in Africa specifically?
Yes, maybe, Jed, as a starting point, start with just painting a landscape of South African automotive industry. In South Africa, we have 7 original equipment manufacturers which manufacture out of South Africa. And in fact, majority of the production out of South Africa is for exports into mainly Europe, United Kingdom, and into the US. So we have a very proud history of automotive manufacturing, which actually spans back more than 100 years in South Africa. The value chain produces for export to over 350,000 vehicles. Now, this is a lot of vehicles for us in terms of it's been good for the economy. However, on the global scale, it represents less than 0.5% of the global volume of production. It may sound small. We're very ambitious in terms of the South African Automotive Master Plan. We are looking to increase this to about 1% of the global production by 2035. This industry employs over 120,000 people in South Africa, which is quite significant. We're looking to increase this to about 240,000 jobs by 2035 in terms of the master plan. The whole business plan or the whole business model of South African automotive industry is that we need to increase or to maximize localization, which means if we assemble a vehicle, the majority of the parts or a significant part of the components must be manufactured here locally in South Africa. Currently, on average, we're sitting at around 39% localization. We have an ambitious plan to increase this to 60% localization. In terms of the African market broadly, we do export into other markets in Africa. We have a very strong pickup or what we call bakkie in South Africa, which is light commercial vehicles. We have Ford manufactured in South Africa, Ford Ranger. We have the Nissan Navara manufactured in South Africa. We have the Toyota Hilux manufactured in South Africa. And these are actually ideal vehicles that get exported into the African market. This market is still a very small percentage of the numbers that I quoted earlier on for export. And with the Africa Trade Agreement, Free Trade Agreement, we're looking to leverage this and actually start to export into the other African countries. There are some challenges, and maybe we can touch on those challenges as we go on with our podcast. So that's the landscape of the South African automotive industry. It's a significant part of our manufacturing capacity and export in South Africa, and we're looking to expand this quite aggressively going forward.
Interesting. Thank you very much for sharing. Those are great insights, and you dug deeper into the industry so that we can learn and understand what it is, and especially understanding how South Africa is positioned to help the automotive sector in Africa from an export perspective and from an inspiring perspective, because most countries in Africa want a bakkie. Definitely, if South Africa produces most bakkies, most countries will then be importing these bakkies. What kind of future do you foresee for the South African automotive sector, particularly in automotive manufacturing and African trade?
Yes. So as I said earlier, we've got a very strong components manufacturing sector. So generally they're referred to as tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers of components. So we have a fairly sophisticated industry in that regard. However, in the African context, we are also blessed in the region to have, some of the raw materials that may go into automotive manufacturing. For example, iron ore, which makes steel. We've got lithium, which has a potential for electric vehicles in the future. You have a lot of components or raw materials that go into the manufacturing process of automotive of vehicles. Now, how I see the future of Africa in the automotive space is us positioning ourselves to beneficiate these minerals before we export them. Right now, we export iron ore into Europe. It comes back to us processed, and we then use it to manufacture vehicles, which is not correct. How I see the future of automotive in Africa is that we must beneficiate our minerals in Africa, export them into these high manufacturing countries like Germany and even Japan and so forth. That's how I see the future, is us positioning ourselves as a beneficiary of our raw minerals. Secondly, I think we can leverage the capacity of South Africa as a components manufacturer to look at exporting into other countries like Ghana, like Nigeria, who have now started having their own manufacturing base. Egypt, for example, has a strong manufacturing base. They manufacture Nissan in Egypt. So if we can look at country to country exports within each other into Africa trade and take advantage of integrated free agreement to actually start exporting components either out of South Africa into these countries that are beginning to have a strong automotive manufacturing infrastructure or companies that are investing there. So whether components being manufactured in Egypt coming into South Africa or Ghana manufactured coming into South Africa or the other way around, I think that will improve the value chain. You must remember, the only thing that makes logic in automotive is that you must reduce logistical costs. You must obviously provide the right quality of component, and you must deliver it on time. It makes sense that as the automotive industry develops in other African countries, that we start trading amongst each other, because it will reduce logistical costs and it makes a business sense in that sense.
Certainly, interesting times ahead. Talk about the future of automotives in Africa. I know you've touched a little bit about that, but what does that future look like, including EVs and green mobility?
Yes, there's an interesting development that's happening in the e-space on what we call new energy vehicles, or NEV. And this it can include gas propelled, it can include battery electric vehicles, it can include other forms like hybrids and so on. There is some legislation that has been promulgated in places like the UK, for example. They've said by 2030, they will not be registering any new vehicle that is internal combustion engine. In other European countries, the rest of the European Union have said 2035, they will not be registering any new vehicles that internal combustion engine. So what does that mean for us as Africa? In South Africa, as I mentioned earlier on, majority of our production is for export into these markets. So it means that from a manufacturing point of view, we need to gear ourselves up to be able to produce the same volumes that we're producing today in internal combustion engines for electric vehicles. So we need to prepare ourselves from a manufacturing point of view to be able to do that. So what does that mean? It means we need to attract components manufacturers that are unique to electric vehicles. For example, battery manufacturers, special harnesses that work on electric vehicles, which are high voltage. So we need to start attracting those type of suppliers into our market. So that's the one thing. The second thing is that we need to train our people to upskill them from a normal internal combustion engine, either assemblers or mechanics, into now electric vehicles mechanics. So skills development is a key part of the future of this thing. But the exciting part, as I mentioned earlier on, is that we are blessed in Africa with most of the minerals that actually go into the battery, but particularly. And these minerals are mostly found in Africa. And if we can look at positioning ourselves as African countries to actually start either getting the IP from Europe or elsewhere in the world, or generating our own IP to actually be the battery manufacturing hub of the world, And I think that's it. It sounds in a very ambitious plan, but I think it's definitely doable. There's also an unintended consequence that I anticipate is going to happen. Most African countries, other than South Africa, and some of them are beginning to follow suit. South Africa, it's illegal to import second-hand vehicles. But in other markets in Africa, it's actually very common that countries like Germany, France, Japan, they basically sell vehicles, second-hand vehicles into the African market. The problem with this is that it means that in 2035 and 2030, as they phase out the internal combustion engine, it's very likely that those vehicles, those internal combustion engine vehicles will end up in African markets, which means that in terms of uptake, our uptake as African countries of electric vehicles, it might be slowed down because there will be some kind of dumping of internal combustion engine vehicles in Africa by these first world markets. So there are some alternatives in terms of achieving green energy or greener emissions, if you like. So there are technologies, for example, such as LPG gas, where you can actually convert a normal ICE internal combustion engine vehicle into by installing a system that is propelled by gas, liquid petroleum gas, LPG gas. There's been a big uptake in Nigeria, for example, on CNG, particularly on commercial vehicles. This option, the good thing about it is that it's a dual system, so you still keep your normal petrol or diesel engine. However, you then introduce gas, which is far more environmentally friendly, one. But secondly, it's also far cheaper to run than the normal fuel, which is petrol or diesel. Most fleet owners have looked at now converting their vehicles that are either petrol or diesel into gas or dual, both gas and fuel and gasoline stroke diesel. So there's an opportunity for us there in Africa to look at, although we'll be slow in the uptake of battery operated vehicles, but there's an opportunity for us to look at gas as an alternative for us to achieve cleaner energy. It's not 100% clean, but it's cleaner than petrol or diesel, but also looking at reducing our operating costs because gas is much cheaper than the other fuel types.
Interesting. I think I've seen in Johannesburg a fuel station that has got gas as well, and I've seen Texas in Johannesburg. So it's interesting to see how this is moving. What are the AIDC's key objectives and role in South Africa in particular and in Africa broadly?
Yeah, the objective of the AIDC is really 5 objectives. Yeah. The first one is retention. As I mentioned, that the South African industry, automotive industry, has a very rich history. It's got significant employment. It's a significant employer in the country. It's a significant contributor to our GDP. So it makes sense that we protect what we have. So let us keep what we have and protect what we have. So the retention is a big part of our strategy. The second part of our objective is to grow this industry. As I've said, we're looking at becoming contributing to at least 1%. As I said, initially currently we're sitting at below 0.5% of the world production. We need to look at growing that and doubling that to 1% of the world. It might sound small, but in our world, that's big. And it's a lot of jobs that you can potentially create. There's also, as I've mentioned earlier, Ghana and Nigeria are fast-growing industries in terms of automotive manufacturing. In fact, our former Minister of Trade and Industry, Mr. Owen, has been spending a lot of time in these two countries to assist them to develop their automotive master plans, similar to our automotive master plan that we have. There's also an important part that grows this industry is providing incentives for the OEMs and the components manufacturers. So part of that master plan is really looking at our incentive programs and attracting more foreign direct investment through incentives. So that's the growth strategy, the objective. The next part of our objective is innovation. We've talked earlier on about electric vehicles. This is fast-coming development. That's a reality for most of us. And if you're going to be playing any role in the automotive export particularly, you better move fast in terms of innovating in this space here. Also, as I mentioned, there's other alternative means, for example, during conversions from petrol to gas. So we're looking at playing a big role as AIDC to make sure that we promote this type of innovations in our industry. The next objective is transformation. You see, the reality about the automotive industry in the South African context is that it's either being foreign owned, and there's very few Black Africans that are meaningfully participating in this industry. So part of our objective is to transform this industry, to make it representative of the demographics of South Africa and Africa for that matter. So transformation is a key part of this. And my advice would be for countries that are still looking, African countries that are still looking to get into the automotive space, should learn from our mistakes, so to speak, and make sure that locals are involved right from the beginning. Africans are involved. So transformation, we are working with a backlog of transformation because of our history, as everybody knows it, with apartheid and all that. And I think other African countries have an opportunity now as late entry into the market to actually make sure that it's transformed. And the last pillar of our strategy and objective is people. And I've mentioned that the skills are the only thing that will differentiate us from the rest of the world. If you look at how countries like China and India have developed, is that they've invested a lot in skills development, in IT, in new automotive technologies, in artificial intelligence, and those type of new technologies or technological skills. Now, one of the challenges in Africa is that we don't have enough intake of children, or pipeline rather, of students or candidates that come out of our high schools and even universities that comes from what we call STEM. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There's not enough of our people that do these subjects or this type of skill set. And these are key for the automotive industry. We need to deliberately then promote from high school level into tertiary institutions, whether it's technical colleges or universities. We need to promote these type of skills, which will feed the skill sets into the automotive industry. At the AIDC, for example, we've got the Automotive Learning Center, which is basically a tertiary, if you like, our own university on campus. We offer subjects such as mechatronics, auto electrical. We offer also mechanical, whether it's diesel or petrol mechanical repairs. We offer things like welding, which is a big part of the automotive industry. We offer things such as boiler making. And so these are hardcore skills that are required in the automotive space. So that is the last pillar, which is people. So I'll just summarize it. The first one is retention, keep what we have. The second one is grow into new markets. Three is innovate, so innovation. 4 is transformation. And lastly is focus on our people.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Can you share some success stories with us of foreign investment in South Africa's automotive industry? And are you optimistic in attracting further auto-related investment, and of what nature?
So we've had some fantastic stories. In the past couple of weeks, BMW is celebrating 50 years in South Africa. And there was a big celebration of this legacy of BMW. And it's literally based actually across our campus, the AIDC campus in Roslyn, Pretoria. BMW is a very proud history in South Africa. They've produced all sorts of different models. I think in big volumes, they've produced the 3 Series for export market. Currently, the BMW is producing the BMW X3 also for export market. At the celebration ceremony, they pronounced an investment of 4.8 billion rands, which is about $260 million US investment. And this investment is specifically for the X3 manufacturing of what they call a hybrid plug-in, which is basically the electric version of the X3, which is a hybrid version, which has both battery operated and fossil fuel operated. So this is massive. This is going to be one of the largest X3 plants outside of Germany. So this is a fantastic story, which for us as AIDC, it's a massive leverage for us to also develop our own local suppliers. There's been the Mercedes-Benz, for example, in East London, has been here for over 65 years. In fact, they're celebrating their 65th year. They exporting the C-Class for the European, United States, and UK markets. Excellent. They've won some worldwide quality awards, the J.D. Edwards Award for quality. These have been some fantastic success stories in South Africa. Ford Motor Company is currently producing over 700 vehicles per day for export market in Pretoria, in the area of Silverton. This creates a massive amount of jobs. In fact, as AIDC, we're also running an incubation hub at Ford, where we're looking at introducing young Black suppliers that can supply onto the production line of Ford. And we've had some really success stories. One of them actually is currently doing painting of the Ford Ranger bumpers. And he's basically producing bumper sets for over 700 vehicles per day. And that's a massive volume. And yeah, these are really good success stories. And we are looking at expanding these and working on this and leveraging this. And it should be good to share these stories with some of our African brothers and on the continent, and see how they can learn from what we've done. And also they can learn the mistakes that we've made in the process.
Certainly. I also believe that South Africa plays a critical role in educating and sharing these experiences. The Africa Automotive show is expected to draw automotive decision makers from across the whole of Africa and its global partners.
Yeah.
What are your objectives for being there? Who are you most excited to connect with? What are your expectations?
We're very excited to be part of this. We're looking forward to interacting with our African counterparts from other African countries. As I mentioned earlier, countries like Ghana and Nigeria are at the beginning of where we were probably let's say 50 years ago in terms of our development of our automotive strategy. We have a very strong tier 1 and tier 2 components manufacturing industry. We'll be looking to interact with these manufacturers or assemblers to look at matchmaking our suppliers to possibly supply components into these manufacturing facilities in Ghana, in Egypt, in Nigeria. So I'm looking forward to meeting some of the counterparts from these countries that are doing vehicle assembly. I'm looking forward to also meeting some components manufacturers that may be in these countries that are looking to export into South Africa. As I said, we've got 7 manufacturers in South Africa. There's plenty of opportunity for components manufacturers that come out of Africa to come into South Africa and provide, and as long as it makes business sense, of course. The other thing that I think I haven't mentioned, we haven't spoken about enough, is the heavy commercial vehicles. South Africa, one of the big industries in South Africa is production of bodies for heavy commercial vehicles. So this could be drop side bodies. This could be what we call bread bodies. They could be box bodies. It could be trailers. There's a massive industry in South Africa of commercial vehicles. And I'm looking forward to meeting some of the truck operators or truck manufacturers in Africa to look at how we can promote some of our bodybuilding capabilities. For example, we have a very vibrant refuse compactor industry in South Africa, where we produce refuse compactors. And that's a very sophisticated body on the back of a truck. And we've had a good experience in those and years of experience in producing those. So there could be export opportunities out of South Africa. So I'm looking to meeting with everything from components manufacturers to OEMs that are producing in other African countries, to bodybuilders that are introducing our capabilities on bodybuilding in South Africa, to also meet end customers that are looking to procure or to actually produce either on license or on some kind of arrangement based on the technology that we've developed here in South Africa. So I think it's going to be exciting. I'm hoping that the audience will be right, and the networking, looking forward to networking with our counterparts from other African countries.
Certainly. As you were speaking, you brought a memory. I attended the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Business Forum in Cape Town earlier this year. And one of the things that comes to memory is that Africa has got a requirement of over 1 million trucks under the African Continental Free Trade Area. So those trailers, tankers, there's a huge demand. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yes.
To support our show, please leave a review and share this episode. You can also connect with us on social media using the handles in our show notes, or visit our website, scixpodcast.africa. See you next time.